Okay, so for you, Scott, ultimately you wound up with an interest in electrical engineering and ultimately aviation. Mark, what piqued your interest in maritime engineering and transportation?
Well, uh, the, we spent a lot of time on the New Jersey shore. My parents always had a boat from the time we were very little. We'd go out fishing. We'd go down there usually for the summer.
Not like the TV Jersey Shore.
Yeah. So we go down there for the summer and spend a lot of time on the water. Later, when we were teenagers, we were able to stay down there in the summer by ourselves on our parents' boat. You know, not a big boat like in the 35-foot range, but big enough for the two of us to live on. So I was very interested in, seamanship and maritime-related stuff. So probably when I was 13 or 14, I started looking at either going to the Merchant Marine Academy or the Naval Academy or the Coast Guard Academy. But the Merchant Marine Academy really got my interest.
And for you, Scott?
Well, plus our grandfather was an officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine and a fireboat captain in New York City, so that was, I think, also played a small part in the interest in, having a third mate's license, which I actually still have. I kind of kept it current all these years, and never actually thinking I would sail on the license. But the reason I went to the school that I did was because it was they had Navy ROTC there, and they also it was a regimental type of environment. I thought it'd be better for me, giving more time to focus on schoolwork, and I was obviously right.
Which one of you decided to become a pilot first?
My recollection, it was me, but because he was a year ahead of me in college, he actually was in the Navy first and flew first, but that's just my recollection.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And did that influence you to follow in his footsteps, basically?
I was pretty committed to the Navy before he was, because I was on a Navy scholarship in college.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I actually looked at even going, hate to say this, but for a while I looked at going into the Air Force, and actually considered it, took the test, and they offered me, an option of going to Air Force flight school. And, but certainly I'm pretty convinced I took the right path there. Nothing against the Air Force people out there, but.
You were both 5 years old when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot on the moon on Apollo 11. What recollection might you have of that at that age? And ultimately, was that a big influence on your developing an interest ultimately in aerospace or space flight itself?
I don't think I have any recollection of Apollo 11 at all. I think at that age, I don't know what the situation was there, but I don't remember the significance, and I don't remember, man first taking the first steps on the moon. I do remember what I'm pretty sure was either Apollo 16 or 17, one of the later flights, a couple years later, and I was interested in it. It's one of those things when you're that age, you can be interested in something, but it just seems like it's so far off and so difficult to do that you don't really take a lot of time to consider it.
And I do have a recollection of it. I can remember being in my our living room, and our parents sitting us in front of the television and having us watch it. But as far as did that influence me, certainly being an astronaut was something that like many kids, I was interested in, but I really never thought it would be a possibility.
So with that in mind, give us a little background on how you were both selected to join the astronaut corps at the same time, which is unique in of itself, which parallels many other events in your lives together.
Well, we both wound up in the same test pilot school class. We didn't apply at the same time. I was in graduate school in Monterey on this combined program, and which includes going to the Naval Test Pilot School, and then Scott applied to Test Pilot School. We actually wound up in the same class. The school didn't even realize it until I think a week before we showed up, and Dick Clark, who now works here at NASA, was looking through the roster. He was the chief flight instructor at the time, and he noticed two guys with the same last name, which, you know, that's kind of common, right? But then he noticed the Social Security numbers, and our Social Security numbers are 3 digits apart. And he was like, okay, well, these guys must be related, or actually, he realized we must be twin brothers. So after test pilot school, I'd say most test pilots apply at some point to the astronaut program, and we both did, and were fortunate enough to be selected to the same class in 1996.
So Scott, it took you only 3 years after your selection before you flew in space for the first time as the pilot on STS-103, Hubble Space Telescope servicing mission. And Mark, you didn't fly until a couple of years later on your first flight, which went to the International Space Station. Was it frustrating for you, Mark, to see your brother fly first? Were those competitive juices flowing at the time?
Not at all. You know, he was the first American in our class to fly of 35. So it was great to, you know, if it wasn't going to be me, it was great that it was Scott flying for the first time. And then I think it was probably 2 or 3 years later that I had the opportunity to fly on STS-108. So,
what were your first impressions of space once you got on orbit, each one of you?
Well, certainly when the solid rocket motors light, you know, for the first time, that gets your attention. I mean, there's nothing that prepares you for the amount of energy that's involved with getting the space shuttle into space. It's, you know, 7.5 million pounds of thrust, all in an instant. You know, you get the impression you're going somewhere. You're really not sure where, but you're going there in a hurry, and you're not coming back to Florida. I mean, it just, you know, kind of looks slow when you're watching it as a spectator, but when you're inside, there's nothing slow about it. I mean, it just really takes off. You know, that's certainly makes a significant impact, significant impression. And also, you know, just seeing the Earth for the first time. It's incredibly blue, you know, brilliant color blue, and incredibly beautiful.
I have this very vivid recollection of about Mach 15 on my first flight, looking over my right shoulder out the window and seeing this blue planet behind me. And it's a view I've never had before. You know, it was the first time seeing something like that, and it was really, really impressive. I even said something to Dom at the time, Dom Gorey, the shuttle commander, that, you know, it was like, wow, that is really amazing.
You know, obviously we've had similar, like we've discussed, you know, similar backgrounds and experiences, you know, similar training as astronauts. And between the time I flew my first flight and when Mark flew his, I tried to explain to him, you know, what that first 8.5 minutes was going to be like. And after his flight, when he landed, I was there in the, you know, the crew transport vehicle when the hatch opened and the crew came out. And the first thing he said to me when he came out of the shuttle after his first flight was, he goes, I had no idea what that ascent was going to be like.
Yeah, it's true. You know, you just try to describe it to other people that are getting ready to do this. And you know, I remember after the solids lit and the main engines looked okay, and I had a few seconds, I looked over, you know, I started thinking, well, this just doesn't feel like I expected it to feel. You know, it's not as smooth as you expect. It kind of feels like you're on a runaway train going 1,000 miles an hour. I remember looking over at Dom because I thought, well, this isn't quite right. And he, you know, he was okay with it, so I'm like, well, this must be what it's supposed to feel like.
How much of a wow moment was it for you, Scott, when you first pulled up alongside the Hubble Space Telescope, knowing this icon of astronomy, you and your crew were about to go service it, upgrade it, and for you, Mark, to see the International Space Station at that time in its fledgling state, but nonetheless pretty impressive. What were your thoughts?
Well, you know, just knowing, you know, what we've learned from Hubble and how far back in time it can see, you know, it's impressive for those reasons. You know, it's about the size of a school bus, so as far as telescopes go, it's pretty big, but just understanding, you know, the impact it's made on our understanding of the origins of the universe is, you know, makes it a very impressive sight. Now, compared to the space station, you know, especially the last time when I saw it on my one flight, it's, you know, Hubble's a lot smaller and, you know, less visually impressive.